Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just had the highest scoring game of his career at 54 points, the first time ever he has gone over that 50 mark. And as the NBA gradually moves more and more into favoring the three-pointer, as well as being filled with guys around the league who you can't necessarily rely on night in, night out. They might be inconsistent, give you 31 night and 12 the next. SGA of the Oklahoma City Thunder has been the exact opposite of that. He has been a model of consistency, a master of the mid-range, and loyal to his small market team. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and this is how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is breaking the NBA. First of all, here, the thing that really sets up all the other abilities of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a player is his mid-range shot, which has over time become something of a lost art in the NBA. As time has gone on, the long twos that you might see a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge or Carmelo Anthony make have turned into stepping back a little bit further for a three-pointer, because teams have kind of decided that if you're going to take a shot from distance, you might as well make it count. And you make it count by making it worth more than just a normal two-pointer. And I think Carmelo's a really good example of this, because in the very last season of his career with the Los Angeles Lakers, he was the best shooter on that team. And that was a team that very much lacked spacing. And as a result, Carmelo had to step up and be a three-point shooter for this team. But it's the polar opposite of how it was when he came into the league, where he was able to thrive more in the mid-range and just become an all-time great scorer in that area. But as time went on, in his last season in the NBA, he had to develop and evolve and become a better shooter in the back half of his career, just because of the evolution of the game. And as a result of all of this, the mid-range has kind of become a little bit of a lost art. It's seen as something inefficient, not really worth taking for the most part, when you can step back a little bit further and take a three, or step forward a little bit more and have a higher efficient two-pointer. But some of the best scorers in the NBA are really, really good mid-range shooters. You look at Giannis, he's really developed that part of his game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who that's what this whole thing is about right now, he is an elite mid-range shooter. Same thing with a guy like De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Durant, one of the best shooters of all time, best scorers of all time. The thing about the mid-range is, well, yes, there's some truth to, the how worthy it is to really be a major part of your shot diet. When you are able to hit the mid-range shot on a consistent basis, teams not only have to guard you from three or inside the paint, but now there's a third area, a third level of the court where they need to really key in and pay attention to you, because they know that you are a threat to score from out there. Hence the phrase three-level scorer. And SGA is a great example of that. Especially this year, he has shot the ball a little bit more from three, but he has plenty of volume in the mid-range and inside. And as a result, the defense has to be paying attention to SGA at all times. And that opens up opportunities for other guys on this team, like a Jalen Williams, like a Chet Holmgren when he's healthy, or even a wide-open Isaiah Joe from beyond the arc. It opens up opportunities for the guys around him to go out there and just be able to be in the right spot and ready for the pass from SGA. And he has a vision to get it to him, but being able to be a three-level scorer, and a very good one at that, and just mastering the mid-range in the modern NBA, when that's something that so many teams don't focus on now, has allowed him to become the great scorer that he is, because teams have to respect him every step of the way. And it just makes him a new kind of level of offensive engine, because you've got to guard SGA at all three levels, and if you do that, he can get the ball to an open man too. So he's really kind of unguardable on offense when you take into account everything that he can do. And that mid range especially is kind of what unlocks it all, because it's the factor that is lost so often now in trading modern NBA players. You're going to focus on the three, you're going to focus on the close twos, but you don't focus on the mid range as much, because the analytics don't favor it. But when you're able to utilize the mid range to the level of a guy like SGA, that can take your game to the next level. The next thing here is his consistency. The point guard position specifically, this is something that is really important, is consistency. because this is a guy that is going to be more than likely the primary ball handler for your team. There are very few exceptions. There's some, like, say, LeBron or Giannis, although that's been limited now with the arrival of Damian Lillard. For the most part, the point guard is your primary ball handler, and it's always traditionally been that way. And as time has gone on, the one guard has put a little bit more of an emphasis on actually scoring the basketball and creating shots for themselves. Traditionally in the past, this was always your pass first guy. They're going to look for the open man first and their shot second. But as time has gone on, especially you think of the 2010s, the arrival of guys like Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, the scoring point guard has become more and more a factor in the modern NBA. And it's really a crucial part of your game that you need to be a capable scorer as a point guard, or at the very least, willing to take your own shots. You look at a guy like Tyrese Halliburton this season, who's perceived as having a little bit of a down year. His playmaking numbers are still pretty good. He's one of the best passers in the entire league, but where he's really struggled this year is in that scoring department. And for a lot of people, he's kind of been seen as having a very disappointing season, and perhaps rightfully so. But with scoring becoming more and more of a factor for the modern NBA point guard, some guys just aren't ready to live up to that because they have the ball in their hands a lot and they've got to look for their own shots now as well. And so as a result, just feeling the pressure to be able to, contribute to the box score and get their points up, they might take some risky shots and be inefficient night in, night out, or they might be inconsistent. They might score 31 night and 12 the next. You look at a guy like D'Angelo Russell, kind of comes to mind, but for SGA, he is a model of consistency, and I think that's really key to, the mid range might take his offensive game, his ability as a player to the next level, but his consistency is what really puts it all together, wraps it up in a nice little bow. Because D'Lo, as I highlighted earlier, is someone who has bounced around the league a lot, and that's because he has nights where he can be really good, and you see all his potential as an offensive engine. But then other nights, he might score in the single digits, and it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be on 2 for 12 shooting, and as a result, his value is always fluctuating, and so often teams are not willing to take a chance on him. But for a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you always know what you're getting. It seems like night in, night out, he's pretty much due for a 30 piece. And this 50-point game was the first time he ever hit that mark in his career. But for the last 3 years now, he's been a 30-point per game scorer, and he's never hit that 50 mark until now. So that just shows you, night in, night out, because of course we all know how averages work. You might score 50 and then you might score 10, and your average is going to look pretty good. But your actual value and what you're contributing to your team on a nightly basis, that is fluctuating. But SGA, you can consistently count on him night in, night out to get you about 30. And as a result of that, your team can game plan around that. They don't have to worry about a bad night from SGA because so often that's just not the case. So often that simply doesn't happen. And so you're always able to play with a certain flow on offense, knowing that you can trust your lead guard to not just play make for others, but be a safe, stable, efficient, and consistent scorer. Then there's the factor of his defense, because at the point guard position, especially in the modern NBA, he is once again kind of the antithesis of how we look at players and their roles on a team, especially as a major offensive engine. Because for one, point guards already are perceived as not having to be particularly great defenders, because on the perimeter, you've got small forwards and shooting guards that can kind of make up for your lack of defensive capabilities, and we see that so often with players. They just don't always put in the effort in on that defensive end. And then the post, obviously, you've got your bigs to make up for that, and you don't have to worry about that whatsoever. So for so many one guards, they can kind of not key in on that defensive aspect of the game whatsoever. And if they were having a bad night offensively, once again, D'Angelo Russell comes to mind. If they're having a bad night offensively, if they are kind of inconsistent night in, night out, you are able to make up for it a little bit if they're a good defender, because at the very least you're getting value on that end each and every night. But for a guy like D'Lo, he's not a particularly good defender either. And man, this sounds like a D'Lo hate video. I love D'Angelo Russell, one of my favorite players in the league, but he does have his flaws as a player for sure. I love his high moments. There was one time I didn't have League Pass yet, and I'm a Timberwolves fan, and he was still with us at the time. We were playing the Philadelphia 76ers, and he scored 27 points in the fourth quarter in overtime. And I paid $1 to watch that game when he was starting to heat up, and we ended up making a comeback win against Philly, and I remember that very well. So just that little bit tangent there. This is not a D'Lo hate video. Love D'Lo, but he does have his flaws as a player for sure. But getting back to SGA, he is already consistent on the offensive end, so you could give him a pass like you would a guy like Luka Doncic for being able to carry, like a Trey Young, even for being able to carry the load of the team on the offensive end. You could give him a pass for being a bad defender. No one would speak that negatively about him in that regard because of what he does for his team on offense every single night. But he focuses in on defense as well. And OKC has been a great defensive team this year, even with guys like Chet Holmgren missing time. And he's been a major, major factor to that. I think, in my opinion, of course, most of the defensive attention is going to go to a guy like the center, you look at Rudy Gobert, Wemby, and that's fair. These are the guys who are more often than not going to be the most impactful defenders on a team. But I think having a good defensive point guard, the one who was going up against the primary ball handler on the other team on nearly every possession, I think that can really set the tone for your entire defense. You look at a Drew Holiday, a prime Marcus Smart, because they're more likely than not going to be going up against the primary point guard for the other team. And so that point guard is going to be the one that's going to be getting a lot of the possessions, a lot of the reps, having to make quick decisions with the ball, especially if they're going up against a great perimeter defender. And that can kind of shake them off their game. And in my opinion, I don't see this talked about enough. I think a very good defensive point guard can really set the tone for the entirety of a defense, even if, technically it may not be the most important. When we look at defensive players, you might look at every other position and say that defense is more important. But having a really good defensive point guard, a great one, can set the tone for your entire defense. And that's what SGA does. He's not the best defender on his team. You've got J-Dub, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso now, Chet Holmgren, but he's a very good one in his own right. And you could give him a pass if he wasn't, but he is. And that's what is so great about him, is that he goes the extra mile to be the best player that he can be. And that kind of brings me into my last point here. And the fact that he's doing this all on a small market team. He is a small market superstar. Because every single season in the NBA, players are making more money than ever before. It's always, the new highest paid player in NBA history. Because continually, the league is making more revenue, and that's going over to the players. And in line with that, players are going to get more money if they get more attention for the level of player that they are. And so as a result of that, they might want to play in a big market or historic franchise like, say, Boston, Los Angeles, New York, to just get the most eyes possible on them, so that maybe they've got more options available for them if they want a big contract, or just go somewhere prestigious. And some people just kind of dream of living in LA or New York and utilizing that money to the best of their ability and living a life of luxury. And as a result of that, it can kind of put small market teams at a little bit of a disadvantage because they don't have the flashy lifestyle, and you're not always going to have the most eyes on you. But for a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, from everything that he has said, he is really happy in Oklahoma City, and that this is his team, of course, but it's also kind of his city in the way that all the fans are able to rally around him, and this is a city that is very, very passionate about basketball, and the fan base is able to rally around not just this great team that's having an incredible season, but the man that is leading them to that incredible season in SGA. So he feels at home here. And something else I want to highlight here is that small market superstar point that I made earlier. And with the rise of social media, especially, it has its negatives for sure. I really don't like highlight culture, where you can kind of try to define a player. People try to define a player by their highlight reel, when so often there's so much more to it, so much more nuance to it than that. But if there's one positive to it, you look at a guy like Anthony Edwards in Minnesota as another example to kind of prove my point here, is that it allows for guys in smaller markets like Minnesota or Oklahoma City to define their own brand and not have to go to a major media market like New York to do so. And they get plenty of attention, these two guys do, for being some bright young stars in the NBA. So even though they're in smaller markets, they get plenty of attention, and these teams kind of rally around them, kind of in an effort to keep them and say, "Hey, stay here. We'll make you feel at home. Just stay on our team. Don't go to New York. Don't go to Boston. Stay here. We're gonna bring you some championships, and we're just gonna give you all the adoration all the adoration that we can give you." And for SGA, he has kind of set his own brand. He's a very popular player, and rightfully so for his play on the court. So despite being in Oklahoma City, that kind of feels like a home for him, in spite of that small market. And he's turned it into his own and created his own brand around it. And he's not at a deficit for being a small market player, when so often people are going to try to gravitate towards the larger markets. So those are some ways, in conclusion, that SGA is breaking the NBA in a sense by kind of going against traditional norms. And this is something that I'm very passionate about. I think, just homogeny of small market players always kind of leaving and going to big markets. I'm a Timberwolves fan, so as I mentioned earlier, so you look at like Anthony Edwards, the circumstances that we put him in recently with the cat trade, and that hasn't worked out the best for us. It's a situation where a lot of people are betting on him to not spend his whole career over here as a Timberwolf, and I'd love to keep him, and so I in my personal biased opinion, yes, I do kind of dislike the idea of small market players going to bigger market teams, but from beyond just my perspective, I don't like the homogeny of it, because it kind of the league's at its best when there's parity. When every single team has some talented players, and night in, night out, you can never truly guarantee a win. You look at the Detroit Pistons last year; they were real bad. They broke the NBA record for most consecutive losses in a year. But towards the end of that losing streak, they had a game against the Boston Celtics where they led big at one point, where they almost beat the eventual NBA champions, and that is parity right there. But if players are always just going to LA or New York or Boston, then there's a lack of parity when players just go to the best teams in the biggest markets in the league. And it leaves the small market teams with not much to root for and a severe lack of competition in the NBA. And so to just fight against the homogeneity of that, to have guys that are having their own brand and representing a small market city, that's huge. I love that. And just everything else about it, the lost art of the mid range, SGA kind of bringing that back and showing how valuable it can be as a weapon in your arsenal, as well as stuff like the defensive aspect. Dennis Schroeder is one of my favorite point guards in the entire league for his defensive capabilities. And so just all of that kind of stuff. This is kind of stuff I love talking about. I love the nuance, especially in basketball. And so to just be able to talk about that and highlight a player specifically who really defines all of that. And as a result, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has kind of grown on me and become one of my favorite players in the league, because he is the antithesis of the modern NBA point guard, and he's breaking the NBA as a result. And it's to much success, not just individually being an MVP candidate these last couple of years, but the Thunder, I believe, have the best record in the entire NBA right now, and they are led by SGA. And he's breaking all the norms of the modern NBA and what you might expect of a typical modern NBA point guard. And it's great to see. It's great for, parity within the game and parity within teams. Just a net positive. And that is how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is breaking the NBA. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening.